This is a presentation of Globe Pharma's samplers. The samplers can be divided into two groups, the powder samplers and liquid and semi-solid samplers. The powder samplers can be again divided into two groups, unit dose powder samplers and bulk powder samplers. We will be now demonstrating unit dose powder samplers. Within unit dose powder samplers, we have basically three different models. This is model 1. We also call it a single sample design, which means it takes one unit dose sample at each of the sampling locations. The second one in unit dose powder samplers is model 4. This is a duplicate sample design, which means it will take two unit dose samples at each of the sampling locations. And at each location, both samples will come from exactly the same location in the blend. This particular design allows duplicate sampling from the same spot in the blend. And the third one is model 5. This one is just like the duplicate sampler, but this is a triplicate design. It takes 3 unit dose samples at each of the sampling locations. And all the 3 samples at each location, they come from exactly the same spot in the blend. All these samplers I will individually show you in more detail, and then I will show you how to actually use them in an actual sampling situation. I will show you model 1 single sample design sampler in detail. This is the model 1 sampler. Basically, there are 3 parts in this sampler: the outer tube, the inner tube, and then the sample dies here. The outer tube has a conical end piece which can be removed. That facilitates easy cleaning of the outer tube. This can be completely removed, and then you can put it back after cleaning. And now I will show you how to actually put the dies in the sampler, how to close the sampler, open the sampler, and all that. You take the inner shaft, and whatever sample size die you want to use, take that die, put it in the first sample port, and then you will do the same thing in the other sample ports. However, if you don't want to use all the sample ports for sampling, you can always use a blank die to block the sampling port that you do not intend to use. This is a blank die which has no cavity on the top, and that can go in any port that you don't want to use. And then you take the outer tube, insert the inner shaft into the outer tube, and you close it, and then you insert the sampler into the powder blend, which I will actually show you a little later. Then you open this, and when you open this, the powder will fill into the cavity in the sample die. Then you close this, and you remove the sampler holding the outer tube from the drum, and then when you come here near the stand, you just take the inner shaft out, put the inner shaft and the outer tube on the stand separately, and then using a plastic die retrieval tool which has 2 pins that will go underneath the inner shaft, and then you can actually push the die up a little bit and you can pick the die with your fingers. Once that is done, you have a loose powder sample which you can actually transfer to a glass vial and send it to the lab. There is another thing we can do with the loose powder sample, which I will again demonstrate more in detail in a few minutes. We will use another die called a split sample die, where the die design allows you to compact the powder sample into a real tablet which you can submit to the lab. That procedure really eliminates a lot of sampling error. We will discuss that in more detail as we go forward in this demonstration. Now let us go to model 4, which is a duplicate sample design sampler. Again, it can have multiple sample port, or it can have a single sample port as the need arises from you. Here in this example, it has 4 sample ports. In each sample port, you can get 2 samples. Let me show you how we do that. You pull the inner shaft out and put the tubes here. As you can see, in each of the sample ports on the inner shaft, you will insert 2 sample dies of the same size. Whereas the model 1, which I showed you previously, in each port you actually insert only 1 die. Here you insert 2 dies. Let me show you. You insert 2 dies like that, and if you don't want to use this port, for example, you insert 2 blank dies. So in this design, each port accepts either 2 sample dies or 2 blank dies. But if you want to use this as a model 1 sampler, you can put 1 sample die, 1 blank die, 1 sample die, 1 blank die. You can use it that way also. However, it is best to use it as a duplicate sampler. Once you inserted the dies, you insert the inner shaft into the outer shaft, and this is the design that allows taking duplicate samples. You push the inner shaft to the bottom slot on this sleeve. You close the inner shaft, go into the powder, and when you open the inner shaft at the bottom slot, the first set of sampling dies will be exposed to the powder, and the powder will go into the cavities. You close that, and now you pull only the inner shaft up like this. Now you open at the top slot. Now the second set of dies would be exposed to the powder, and they're exposed at the same spot in the blend. Once you did that, you close the inner shaft and pull the sampler out of the powder, and you then there is a little trick you can use here so that the powder doesn't leak out of the dies. You see, keep the inner shaft such, after you open, such that the dies are facing up. Then you try to move the outer tube like this, okay, like come out like this. So that way your dies are always facing up and you don't lose any powder into the outer tube. So, because there is some clearance between the outer tube and the inner shaft, there is a possibility for some powder to leak into the outer tube. What I suggest that you do if that happens is, after each sampling, you just invert the outer tube and empty out any collected powder there before you go for the next sampling. That clearance between the outer shaft and the inner shaft is very important to have. I think it is something like 15 to 20 thousandths of an inch. If we don't have that gap, or if we reduce that gap, there would be too much friction between the outer tube and the inner shaft, and that could create a generation of metal particles, which you don't want to have. That's why we deliberately keep a good clearance between these two shafts. Now we have inserted the dies in the inner shaft, and the inner shaft is inside the outer shaft, and now we are ready to go into the powder blend and take samples. Insert the sampler into the blend. Now you open the inner shaft at the bottom position first. That exposes the first set of dies. You close that. Now you pull the inner shaft up. Now you open it at the top location. It will fill the second set of dies. You close. Let us see how the samples look. While you take it out, you may want to turn the sampler down so that the dies are facing down, so excess powder falls down. Then you can turn it around and let us open it here and see how the samples look. So that is how the samples are, and let us see the second set of samples, how they look. That's the second set of samples. We will take the sampler out, close it, and we will take it to the stand. There is one other suggestion I would like to give you. When you take the sampler out of the blend and you try to take the inner shaft out of the outer tube when you are using a triplicate sample design, you just, once you open the inner shaft, keep this handle in the same position and maneuver the outer tube so that your inner shaft will come out, but the dies are always facing up. That way you don't lose any powder by turning the inner shaft back and forth. Now it is model 5, which is a triplicate sample design sampler. And this is an example of the sampler. It has 3 sample ports. From the outside, it does look like a single sample design, but as you have seen in the duplicate sampler, the inner shaft has openings or ports that accept 3 sample dies in each port. And here we insert 3 dies. Usually these ports are a little bit tighter because this inner shaft is made of Delrin, which is a white FDA approved plastic material. Some customers want to have a Delrin or Teflon inner shaft for different reasons like static and things like that. So we custom make these upon customer's request. And you insert the 3rd die also. So now you have all the 3 dies in the port, and now you insert the inner shaft into the outer shaft and go all the way down to the bottom slot here. Now you can see that we are at the bottom slot and the ports are closed. Now we can go into the powder, and now we will open the inner shaft at the bottom slot first. So you can see that the first set of dies will be exposed to the powder. You close, pull the inner shaft to the middle slot, open it. Now the second set of dies are exposed to the powder. You close the inner shaft again, pull it up to the top slot, open again. Now the last set of dies are exposed to the powder. Now you close it, and then you pull the sampler out of the blend, and now you can take the inner shaft out. And using the same die retrieval tool, you can push each die up and take them out of the inner shaft. Is model 5A unit dose powder sampler. This we also call it model AK47. This is how it works. The container here, or you can call it a sampling die, has 3 holes there in which you can actually put capsules to collect samples. Let me show you that. These are size 4 capsule here. This is a size 4 capsule. I'm going to remove the cap and insert the capsule into one of the holes, just like that in the other 2 holes here. Now the capsule bodies are inserted in the die. Now the die goes into the holder, and this is the cap. So you push the cap here. Now this would be used to take unit dose samples from the discharge from a blender. So this is a discharge sampler, or you can call it a stream sampler. You insert the sampler into the stream, and when you're ready to take a sample, you retract the cap, let the powder fill, then push the cap back, and the cap will push the excess powder out. And since the cap is kind of dome shaped, conical shaped, no excess powder would accumulate on the cap. Then you remove the die, and you can eject the capsules by using a small plastic tool with 3 pins here. So you just push the capsules up like that, and then you can put the caps back on. You put the caps back on, then you can remove the capsules and just lock the caps. So you got 3 samples unit dose from by using the stream sampler, which is model 5A. Just like this, you can have dies that have 10 holes there, so you can take 10 samples at a time. If we have a split die, round split die, like the ones I showed you with model 1 or model 4 or model 5, a round die, you can use that also with the stream sampler, and you can actually compact all the samples into tablets also. So you can get 10 powder samples, unit dose, which you can compact on the manual compaction machine, so you get 10 compacts as a sample. You can also use this sampler for bulk powder sampling. If this holder or the adapter can hold a bottle, we have bottles like that too, you can actually use the bottle to collect a bulk powder sample also. This is another unit dose powder sampler that is unique the way it works. I will show you the details of all the components, and then we will do an actual demonstration also. In this sampler, the sample enters into the split die from the bottom, and then we remove the die with the powder sample, and then we compact that into a tablet using the same manual compaction machine. The advantage with this is the powder is going into the die straight up instead of going from sideways like it happens in model 1, model 4, model 5, model 2, 1A, 1B, and 1BB samplers. That is the only difference in this, and some customers like to have the powder sample enter the die straight up or straight down. So I will show you the details of this one. This has a cap which has one opening here. Let us remove the cap. It is a threaded cap. And then there is a similar shaped Delrin plastic piece that also has a corresponding opening, and you can push that out by pushing the inner shaft down. That comes out. This is the die that actually collects the powder sample. Depending upon how big this cavity is, we can control the sample size. Again, this is a split die. Here, just like the other split dies you have seen, the top part has 2 small rubber bushings, and the bottom part has 2 small pins, and when you snap them together, that forms the split die. This is the cap for the die that is also kind of cone shaped, so it turns inside the cone shaped cover. It has a small pin here, and here there is again a rubber bushing with a small hole, so this goes in there, and this then it can swivel like this. Now this is the die with the Delrin cap. Let me show you the inner shaft, how it looks. This is the outer tube. It is just a tube with this slot here, to maneuver the inner shaft, and this is the inner shaft. Just like other samplers, it has a handle, and this is a tube, and there are two Delrin round pieces here just to guide the inner shaft into the outer tube. And if you notice here, the bottom plastic piece has two pins. Actually, once it is inside the outer tube, and when we insert the die, if you see these two holes at the bottom of the die, they actually lock onto these pins like that. So when we turn the inner shaft, this whole thing would turn. Let us assemble it and see how we can make it work. You insert the inner shaft into the outer tube. Then you push the inner shaft out. Now you can see the two pins here, and this piece then will go inside. Then you just turn it a little bit until it snaps into place. Then this cover will go on the outer tube. Once that is done, if you see now, the inner shaft is in a closed position because the opening on the Delrin piece is not aligned with this opening. When you turn the inner shaft, that opening should align with the outer opening. Now the powder can enter. Yeah, if you see the bottom conical part, the opening on the outer stainless steel conical cover is misaligned with the opening on the Delrin piece. That means the die is in a closed position. Now if you turn the inner shaft, now both openings are aligned and the powder can enter when we insert this into the powder bed. I will show you that. And you now close it. Now we will take the sampler out of the blend, place it on the table, and remove the end cap. Now you push the inner shaft out by pushing it down. Okay, the die comes out, and this is how it would look. And as you notice, there would be excess powder in this opening also. That is where the swivel action of this Delrin piece would be helpful. Now we have to remove the Delrin piece, which just comes out like that. Now you have the sampler in the split die. Now you take this split die to the manual compaction machine and you compact it into a tablet, just like you have done with Model 1, 4, 5 samplers. And then you remove the bottom piece and then you eject the tablet. So you got only one sample in the form of a compact, and the powder has entered into the die from the bottom up. So it is a straight entrance of the powder. I want to give you one little tip here. When you insert this part into the sampler, where it has to lock in onto the inner shaft, you just turn it a little bit until locks in place. But when you do that, and you put the cap on, sometimes the holes don't line up properly. In that case, just take the die out and turn it around and insert it again. That should take care of that problem for you. Now I will show you how to compact the powder sample into a tablet on the manual tablet compaction machine. This is the unit dose powder sample we have just taken from the drum using a split sample die. I will show you now how to compact it into a tablet using the manual tablet compaction machine. There is another piece here that is called a compaction ejection block. This has two ports here. One is for inserting the die in there during compaction. What that does is it prevents the die from expanding or deforming during the compaction process. That is more critical when you are dealing with a split die that has a big cavity, because in this case the die wall is so thin. If we don't use this compression block, the die would deform. And now we will go underneath the machine to compact this into a tablet. See, the punch is already inserted in the upper punch holder on the manual compaction machine. And there is a nylon screw that holds the punch in place. And just loosen the screw and let the punch drop and go into the die cavity. That way there will be no misalignment problem. Once that is done, you make sure this valve here on the hydraulic pump is closed, and then you can pump the hydraulic fluid while you watch the gauge to build up pressure. When you are pumping the hydraulic fluid, the piston here is coming down, and it will come down to put pressure on the punch, and you can see the pressure on the gauge is building up. You can go to whatever pressure you need, making sure that you don't compact the tablet to a really hard tablet, because then it may not disintegrate during the analytical process. Usually, depending on the compressibility of your powder blend, use whatever pressure is necessary to get enough hardness so that you can send the tablet, an intact tablet, to the lab. So now the compaction is done. See, the piston is still pressing the punch. The pressure is around, say, 1,000 pounds in this example. Now you release the hydraulic valve. Now the piston has retracted to its original position. Now you can loosen the nylon screw. Just put your finger here at the lip of the punch and one finger here in the middle of the punch. Just push it up and then tighten the screw. Now the tablet, the tablet is there in the die. The powder has been compacted into a tablet. Now we have to eject that tablet out of the die. So what you do for that is take the top part of the die, of the split die, off, and you can see the tablet in the top part of the die, and put that top part of the die on the ejection seat of the compaction ejection block. It goes like this, and now it goes back here on the compaction machine. We do the same thing. Let the punch drop into the dye pocket, and then we pump it again. The tablet has been ejected into this block. Release the pressure. And the tablet, compacted tablet, comes out of this into your hand. So into your hand, or actually it should go into a vial. So this is the tablet we just compacted. So it comes out as a tablet. When you give this to the lab, there would be very little error introduced in handling of this tablet. In effect, that would reduce the sampling error in your sampling process. We highly recommend this technique when you're dealing with low dose, directly compressible formulations. That is where most of the sampling problems arise, and these techniques might be of excellent help when you're dealing with blends like that. And there are 3 different types of punches that cover the entire range of sample size from 0.1 cc to 3 cc. This is 3/8 inch B type tooling, B as in boy. In this, there are a couple of other smaller diameter punches also, but B type, round, and then B like boy, caplet shape, and then the third one is DS, D like dog, S like Sam, and it is a caplet shape. Between the 3 different types of tooling, B round, B caplet, DS caplet, they cover the entire range of 0.1 cc to 3 cc sample sizes. So depending upon your sample size, you may need these punches, different punches, and if you go for DS also, then you need to get one of these upper punch holders, which actually accommodates the DS punch in there. The upper punch that is on the machine, it will accommodate all B type tooling, whether it is B round or B caplet. That is the punch holder you need. Now let me introduce you Globe Pharma's bulk powder samplers. There are 4 different models available for bulk sampling. This is model 3A, this is model 6, this is model 6A, this is model 6B. Let me show you each one is in a little bit more detail. This is model 3A. It can be, of course, fabricated in any length you need, and there is a chamber at the end which is attached to the main shaft with a coupling, and there is an inner shaft which turns the chamber to open and to close, and there is an end piece just like all other samplers which can be removed by pushing the inner shaft down. The sampling chamber protrudes out a little bit, then you can hold it with your fingers and you can slide it out. If you see, there is a flat here, and on the inner shaft, which I will show to you, there is another flat that locks here. So when we turn the shaft, the chamber turns inside. This is the inner shaft that locks here, and when we turn, the chamber turns. The chamber itself, the outer chamber, can be removed from the shaft by loosening this nut and taking it out. And this is interchangeable with other chambers of different sizes. So you can take sample sizes up to 200 cc's. You can also use the inner chamber of smaller capacities if you want to use this as a unit dose sampler. For example, if it is an antibiotic powder for reconstitution or something, they might want to take a 50-gram sample or something, then this can be used as a unit dose sampler also. When you want to assemble this, just insert the inner shaft, insert the die, and then you attach the end piece. Now, if you turn the inner shaft, it is in the closed position. You go into the powder, you open it, then you close it, take the sampler out, and then, like I have shown you before, remove the end piece, push the inner shaft out a little bit, take the die out. That will be your sample. This is model 6 sampler. The standard length is 3 feet, but we can make longer samplers if the customer needs. It has 3 sample ports, and each port can accommodate up to 40 cc of powder. When you want to take a sample, you close the sampler, go into the powder bed, open the inner shaft, close it, take it out, and then when you take it out of the bed, you bring it to a table, and you can place 3 pieces of paper and invert the sampler to take 3 samples separately, or you can combine the entire sample, remove the end piece, and you can empty the powder out this way into a bottle also. This sampler has no partitions, so it is a communicating sampler, and the sample which you obtain with this sampler would be a composite sample. It is not separate. Top, middle, bottom samples are not separate. You get one composite sample. The sampler all the samplers are made of 316 stainless steel only. This is model 6A sampler. It is very similar in design to model 6. The only difference between the two is that this sampler has removable partitions between the ports. Those partitions, if you use them, would permit you to take top, middle, and bottom samples separately. However, if you don't want to use the partitions, you can remove them. Let me show you how to do that. You have to pull the inner shaft out, and if you see here, there is a partition which you can remove with your fingers, and if you don't need, you can take it out, and there is one, there are 2 more like that, and you can put it in when you want to use. And the partitions have no possibility of falling out into the blend because they're underneath this bridge here. And when you want to sample, you close the inner shaft, go into the powder, open, close, take the sampler out of the powder bed, then you can open it and collect the samples onto pieces of paper, or If you don't use the partitions, then it is a composite sample and you can actually empty it out through this port here into a bottle. Or you can take the end piece out, which can be removed, and you can empty the powder this way also. That is only if you don't use the partitions. This is model 6B bulk powder sampler. It is very similar or identical actually in design to model 6B. It has removable partitions just like model 6A, and each pocket will take about 90 cc of sample. Again, you can remove the partitions also and use it as a composite sampler, and when you want to sample, you close, go into the powder, open, close, you bring it up and empty the powder out. And the partitions are like this. These are bigger partitions than in model 6A, and if you don't want them, you take them out. If you want to put them in, that's fine. You get 3 separate samples. There is another unit dose sampler which I'm not showing it to you right now. It is model 5B. That is also a stream sampler. On that sampler, you actually mount 3 unit dose model 1 samplers, and it attaches to the bottom of the blender. Actually, you attach it with bolts, and then as the powder is discharged, it goes through this sampler, and at different times you insert each sampler and turn and take samples. I'm not showing that to you here because we are really not selling that sampler any longer, because we really did not sell many of those. It is a little bit cumbersome to assemble it and also use it. But if you need something like that, please visit our website, and it is mentioned there. All the details are given. We will be glad to offer that to you if you are really interested in that.